authoritarian regimes intensify their power. On the other hand, it is a growth engine in the economy, the dynamics of which can be predicted. In addition, digitalization poses considerable problems. What interests me here, especially, is the question of injustice, or more precisely, educational injustice. In the German educational context, educational injustice has increased massively under the conditions of digitalization. My first example has shown this. Please, slide number 3. Another example can also demonstrate that it is not just an example for resources, but the connection between resources, practices, and structures. It must have been around 2 years, Jean-Paul, ago when Professor Niegena from Butare, Rwanda, and Louvain de la Neuve and I held a digital colloquium with students from the University of Butare. We were each sitting in front of our own computer. The rector was also connected. Only the students had to share one computer, one single computer with more than 100 others. There was no dialogue, no real educational process possible. On another occasion, however, when Professor Niegena invited me to his seminar, things were very, very different. The discussion was about Zoom and good internet provision. The students were not condemned to passivity, but were able to actively participate in the cognitive process. Against this background, I would like to formulate my thesis here. Digitalization has a considerable significance for educational processes, for participation and autonomy. This is why religious education should also deal with it from the perspective of educational justice. In order to demonstrate this, I will proceed in 3 steps. First, I will point out aspects of educational injustice. Second, I will ask what is actually unjust about it by introducing basic features of relevant theories of justice. It's a kind of theoretical impact here. And finally, third, I will discuss the tasks and possibilities of religious education. First, digital divide, forms of educational inequality. Slide number 4, please. Educational inequality in the digital world manifests itself in a very complex way, as has already become clear in my initial examples. What is particularly significant in this context is what educational sociology, and especially in the American and the German context, qualifies as the digital divide, With regard to the connection between social structures and digitalization, one relevant youth study in 2018, before the corona crisis, emphasizes that growing up in a world shaped by digitalization automatically mean that all young people computer and information related require in society and the world of work. If we look at the differences in the performance of 8th graders from families with high and low cultural capital in Germany, a significant difference in performance in favor of young people with high cultural capital becomes very clear. According to this, digital media offer considerable opportunities for communication, for learning and education, but these are unevenly distributed. They are heavily dependent on domestic resources, whether material, habitual, or educational. But this is not the only problem. Social segregation and differences are obviously reproduced and further enforced by digitalization, as my example has shown, especially, as I said, during the corona pandemic. Digitalization itself has become and continues to become a place of difference, a place where differences are generated or reinforced between students in classroom. To the extent that subjects are digitally active, constructing themselves in digitalized life worlds in social media such as TikTok, Instagram, or Facebook, the debates about identity, personality, and subjecthood take on a new quality. On the other hand, however, the intersubjective social constitution of the subject changes both the community and society in its political, cultural, and economic structures. Digital devices, such as smartphones, for example, are not just a thing, but a creator of a world and self-relationships. Because young people's life worlds are digital life worlds, because they live in a culture of digitality. And because existing inequalities have been exacerbating due to the pandemic the great importance of ideological, critical, and political reflections in debates on digitalization in religious education is highlighted. This inequality is referred to as the digital divide, which focuses on three different aspects of this digital divide. The first aspect of digital divide is the division between structures of networks and hardware. There's a difference between rich and poor. Imagine your group of students. Is there a kind of difference in this field, in this aspect of digital divide? The second one is unequal access opportunities to internet, to digitality. And the third one, that has to do with competences, with skills. And the very interesting research result is that students from lower income faces more problems finding their identity in these social media. They acquire less knowledge about the internet. They are not able to develop a critical stance towards the internet. By the way, if you see the election campaigns in the US, you would see how these less of competences would raise a lot of questions and would lead to very difficult situations. So we have to be aware of different structures and different milieus between students in classroom. The next slide, please. It's slide number 6. My second step, controversial justice. But why are the aforementioned phenomena unjust? We talked lengthily about injustice and what is just this morning during the first lecture or during some words here, but what is justice? And why are special phenomena unjust? The number of definitions of justice cannot be overlooked. A little order can be brought to this confusion if we distinguish three different basic approaches towards justice. On the one hand, the first approach is an egalitarian approach. They are concerned with thinking justice according to the principle of equality. From Aristotle to John Rawls and Jürgen Habermas, such equality-based justice is advocated. A distinction is made here between three forms. Distributive justice, all scarce goods must be distributed equally. A cake must be distributed equally. B, commutative, equalizing justice. It provides compensation on those involved so that they are on an equal footing. That's very important when it comes to different students from different milieus. And the question for us, for you in the classroom is it possible for you to compensate these differences the students are already living in? And third, performance justice. What is fair is what corresponds to performance. The second concept is a non-egalitarian concept. The focus of thinkers such as Martha Nussbaum and Amartya Sen is not on formal equal distribution, but on the goods that are necessary for survival. It is an enabling justice to enable our students in classroom. In addition to food, shelter, security, and social belonging, this also includes education. That means education is a matter of justice. These two approaches, which are both based on the theory of goods, can be accompanied by a third line of argument. According to this, the question of justice is ultimately a question of the right to justification. That means who actually determines the principles of justice. This is a modernist approach that breaks with the cosmological and natural law presuppositions on which the principle of to each his own, suum cuique, is still based. It is a question of who decides what share of the cake can be distributed. Who can decide the principle of sharing the cake? That's a political question. That's a structural and also an economical question. And in my view, the most important question. The highest principle is that of reciprocal, equal, and general justification, insofar as every claim to rights, goods, or freedoms must be mutually and generally justified and discursively justified. According to this principle, what is just is that which upholds the justified claims of everyone before all others and before oneself, thereby preserving not only the distribution of goods, but also the recognition of others, the recognition which is so important and sometimes more important than the deliverance of goods, the recognition of others in their otherness. This is because people also feel it is unjust if they are not appreciated, recognized, and respected. Slide 7, please. Religious education, the third and last step for me, a specific approach to justice. This approach seems to have the greatest potential for analyzing the phenomenon of educational injustice in the context of digitalization. However, it should be borne in mind that this concept of justice is supplemented, indeed intensified, from a biblical perspective. For the Christian faith, justice is first and foremost the justice of God. The term is tzedakah, the biblical term, tzedakah, who places the unjust in the wrong and the righteous in the right, who provides them with justice. God's justice is the justice of love that is married and intertwined to mercy, the partisan justice that lavishes itself on the marginalized, the poor, and the weak. Such a way of thinking about justice is based on the anthropological assumption that human freedom is a liberated freedom. God's justice is one of love and mercy, which in contrast to the reciprocal, egalitarian reciprocity of philosophical justice, of these three different concepts I just elaborated on, between subjects has an option a partiality for the poor and marginalized. What does this very theoretical approach mean in concrete terms for my question? I will concentrate on two areas that were also important in the initial examples, the question of resources and the question of practices. In terms of equal opportunities and distributive justice, it is therefore deeply unfair if learners have different levels of equipment with digital devices and skills in dealing with digital media, which, in addition to the skills and abilities to master technology, also involves the competence of media criticism. This inequality does not only apply to the distribution within a learning group at school or university. My opening examples have impressively demonstrated the extent to which the inequality between the global north and the global south is also reflected in the field of digitalization in the classroom, in your classroom, and in the university, in your university here. Here, it is not only learners within a context who are disadvantaged, but with this, the practices in religious education itself must also be considered. I'm not talking about the fact that in German universities and schools, for example, many learners, students, and probably also teachers have many of their texts written by AI, especially ChatGPT, realized performatively in the process itself, and thus learn. They are to use it